Welcome to another episode of Come Together. And we are live with Eric Kline. Eric, welcome. So, Mr. Kline, rather. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Thanks for making the time. How are you today?
Oh, great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course, of course. I'm so happy to have you here. I did some homework on your pretty illustrious career, I guess, over the last 35 years. And one thing that I really found to be so impressive and so creative and so entrepreneurial is that it looks to me, at least, that you've got this amazing skill of storytelling, and
Mm,
particularly behind the camera. And then there's the actual application of however anyone wants a story to be told, right? And storytelling can be done in a ton of different ways. It can be done in marketing, it can be done as music videos, it can be done as a documentary or as a
mm,
film. Um, and so I just wanted to ask, I guess, when you got started off in this
hmm
industry, was there a particular passion that you had, a particular direction you wanted to head, and how did you get to wear so many hats?
Yeah, well, yeah, thank you. First off, I definitely was enamored with music and music videos. I was sort of influenced by, one of my older cousins who was a singer-songwriter and veterinarian out in LA named Doc Lawrence. And he gave me a guitar when I was 17 and sort of turned me on to Springsteen and Bon Jovi and all that. So I was really into the
Nice.
singer-songwriter. And when I got into college, I started to pursue doing visuals to augment. MTV was sort of at fever pitch in the late '80s, having started in '81. So I started doing a lot of music videos for college and whatnot. And my senior project was one of my cousin's songs called "Where Did the Sound Go?" And it was, we were at FIU at the time, and so we were down in Miami, and it lended itself. It was a homeless themed video. You're a little young, you may not remember, but the Camillus House, which is still there, but it's a much bigger building. It was for homeless. People would come in. It was literally across the way from the old Miami Arena. So we went down there, I don't know, 7 or 8 times during the course of the semester and shot hours and hours of just B-roll of, the homeless, the plight of the homeless, and dot dot dot. It became a music video, and that started. I was like, wow, this is it's a great feeling to take someone's song and create visuals for it. And so I started to pursue that path pretty passionately, and then that led me to meet Max Goose, who was at FIU at the time, and Max introduced me to Video Jukebox Network, which became the Box, and that was sort of the beginning of my career in 1991.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. There's a whole lot to unpack over
Yeah,
there. First
there
of
is.
all, I love the, what do you call it? I love the music influence first,
Yeah.
especially because, and it's funny that while you were speaking,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a massive Springsteen fan myself.
Mm.
Yeah, I could say safely that he had changed my life. When I was 21, I had just graduated college. I was lost. I had no idea what I wanted to do with myself. I had a creative writing and literature degree, and my uncle had passed away, and my grandfather had given me a bunch of his records, his old vinyls, and I got my hands on Born to Run.
There you go.
And one of the first things that I, yeah, oh yeah, and one of the first things that I and that I would look at while I was reading the book, while I was reading the lyrics,
Mm-hmm.
on the record sleeve while I was playing it, was how cinematic the entire album was, and how all his lyrics and poetry would just create these scenes and vibrant images in my head. And I really and then I really felt that I felt like he could have been a screenwriter. I felt like he could have really come up with the whole Born to Run album could have really been a film,
Yeah.
and it would have been amazing.
Yeah. No, I mean that's
Yeah.
such a it's an interesting point. I mean, Born to Run was like a seminal moment in his career. For me, it's like, The River, Born to Run, or Born in the USA. Those are my, you know, I mean, Bruce was like you know, just such an incredible inspiration to me. You know, just the messages of what he was, you know, illustrating. I got into him in the Born in the USA era, and then I sort of went back,
Sure.
now,
Yeah.
you know, now he's, you know, he's always been a socially conscious guy, and that really fed into, you know, what I was trying to do as well as a younger kid. You know, with like we are, if you remember, We Are the World, which again was sort of before your era.
Sure.
But I was really influenced, and that was right around the time, you know, I was in high school. So Bruce has been much like yourself, just an, you know, an immeasurable influence to me.
Yeah, that was. Did you watch that documentary that was released on Amazon recently, about
Yep.
maybe a year ago, about
Yeah. The
the making of We Are the World? I thought that was
road diary.
phenomenal.
Yeah. Road diary was great. And
Yeah,
then now in October, they've
yeah,
got really the first biopic, you know, depicting the, you know, the Nebraska and what would be the Born in the USA sessions coming out, Deliver Me from Nowhere. So it's going to be
yeah,
incredible.
yeah. I'm very excited about that.
Oh yeah,
I'm very excited
oh yeah,
about
me
that. And
too.
that man, what's the gentleman's name that's starring? I forgot his name, but he was great
Yeah,
in The Bear.
yeah, he's a great
And
actor.
also in Iron
I
Claw.
just,
Jeremy Allen White.
yeah,
Yeah.
Jeremy Allen White. I just saw the first trailer to it yesterday. It's incredible.
Awesome. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about it. What kind of homework do you do? I know
Mm.
obviously based on the project, because I know I want to talk to you a little bit about two heads but are better than one
Mhm.
also.
Mhm.
But in terms of I mean, you know, whether you're making a music video or a documentary or, you're just trying to think about a project, what kind of homework do you have to do based on each assignment that you do? And, uh, is it research? Is it interviews? Is it like what you did with your first music video
Mm.
where you kind of just camp out and get a lot of footage? How do you go
Yeah,
about
no,
that?
it's a good question. You know, it depends on the situation. I mean, in, you know, 30, you know, 36 years later, you know, after doing that music video and, you know, just it's a different universe today, but, you know, we have access to more information. Sometimes it's not all real information, of course, with the internet. But no, I absolutely try to do a lot of homework on everything I do. You know, if I can meet the artist or the individual, the subject, you get really a better sense, you know, in person to me with everything, whether it's this or, you know, going the other extreme of, you know, dating people or, you know, business partnerships that people do virtually. It's almost, you know, if you don't have that sense of who they are as an individual, or what they're trying to communicate, you know, that to me is paramount. And then, you know, research is obviously important, looking at their prior work in what, or music or whatever the situation would be. And sometimes it's a little tougher if they're not in your state. So I tend to be more fluid as to, you know, being able to travel these days, now that we're, you know, I mean, it's great to do stuff like this, which, you know, I mean, you and I are based in the same state, even though I'm all over the place, but, you know, we're going to hopefully get a high quality product for your podcast and, you know, just doing audio. So I think flexibility is the key, you know, in this day and age and different generations. You know, my parents' generation, your parents' generation, you know, my generation, yours. You know, everything's a little different. So having flexibility, I think, is really the key. But I pretty much do whatever I have to do to get a sense of, you know, inside the artist's head or inside the subject's, you know, mind at that point.
Right. And when you look at these projects, do
Mm-hmm.
you look at that, for example, if someone hires you to do a music video,
Mm-hmm.
are you looking at this, typically, have you found often that they want creative control over, I guess, the cinematography, or they tend to just be kind of hands off and just want to see the final product that you come up with?
Yeah, it
Because I
depends.
could imagine that,
Yeah,
yeah.
you know, it's a good question.
Go ahead,
I
please.
think back in the '90s when I started, you know, the budgets were significantly larger than they are now. Of course, technology is driven it down, in terms of the cost to do these things.
Sure.
Still, though, you can look at you know, a music video today and you can see the quality on the camera or on screen, excuse me, or not. But yeah, I mean, it's like. back then you would deal with the artist and then you would deal with the record company and vis-a-vis the manager. So whether it's like Mariah or Bon Jovi, it's like, I'm dealing with the label and then I'm sitting with the artist, working with the artist, and they would feed through, their manager, in some cases call me, hey Eric, let's chat about this. And it's an integration of everybody's ideas. You're there to help execute against an idea with which you pitched. So you basically submit a pitch to for the concept. The label first looks at a manager, artist, and then they say, hey, we like this. Let's work around that. And and then it becomes first cut, second cut, final cut. When you're a director, producer for an artist, there's always that process. When you're doing a documentary, most of the time, the subject is not really involved, other than they're talking, you're getting information, background, and then them or their representative will have, and you want them to have input as things, you start editing and whatnot. So it's always it's a collaborative process, and I like that. I'm not against that. I think artists on the music side have more creative control, because a lot of the times they're paying for the music videos directly and certainly indirectly as a recoupment of the money that, say, Columbia Records or Sony's going to put out. So it just depends on the dynamic. When you're dealing with a streaming situation like Amazon, Netflix, and Hulu, if you go to them with a project and you sell it to them, it's one thing. If they pay for it, they are absolutely integrated into the entire process.
Sure, and they're going to do whatever they want with
Well, I don't know about
it.
whatever they want. I think it's, again, they're going to have final say, unless there's a big name attached to it, say an artist attached to it. It just depends on the situation. But the old saying, whoever's paying the bills has the final say. So
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Money talks,
yes,
doesn't it?
sir.
Uh, money certainly talks. When it comes to documentaries, I feel like, and I guess you made that point. I even think about it while you were talking about it. But when it comes to documentaries, I guess there would be some kind of conflict of interest, right? If someone's getting them, especially if the individual is alive, or you're dealing with their estate, then there might be something that makes them not look as great as they would have wanted, or maybe they misunderstood or misrepresented. How do you deal with do you ever have to deal with those kind of conflicts, and if you do, how do you work with around that?
Um, back in the '90s, I would do these shorter documentaries, like again, there are layers of people with with a big name artist, say like Mariah Carey. We did a documentary on her in Japan,
Hmm.
and so there were a lot of layers to that, but it was pretty seamless ultimately, because it's we all had the same goal in mind. Really no conflict of interest. Like you said, if someone passes away, or you're doing something on somebody that has passed away, let's say like Tupac, or and whoever it may be, then you deal, like you're saying, with their estate, and they're the legal people with the estate, or the parents or the siblings, or the descendants of the individual. But I haven't really had to deal with that per se, at this point. But we have a big project I'll share with you once. Maybe we'll do another one of these when it comes out. But I'm going to be dealing with a mix of
Yeah, I'd love to.
yesterday, today, and tomorrow's artists. So it's you have to sort of be cognizant that people's images are there, and you have to respect it. Unfortunately, we're in a climate now where most of the news driven things, or the social media driven things, and I'm on social, so I'm not one of these guys that go, well, I'm in my 50s, I'm not going to be on social media. No, I'm engaged, I work it, I use it, and
Good for
I
you.
network on it. And but I also see what, algorithmically, it's very difficult to say that things are positive out there. But there's some interesting dynamics. I mean, creative, people today have more outlets than ever. But when you get to the rights,
Sure.
like your question, is illustrating. You get to the rights of someone that passed away, it's a whole nother legal dynamic.
Yeah, yeah, and one that's pretty complicated, I'm sure. So it must have been a pretty big pivot, I imagine. And I mean, it's interesting because it looks like you got a really wide range of um, I guess emotionally charged, or I guess, there's different types of projects that you've done, ranging from music videos, documentaries, and and I want to talk to you a little about the
Hmm.
Holocaust,
Hmm.
and the projects that you're working on now. Because one thing that I've noticed actually, so I actually teach part time. I teach high school English part time
Okay.
in a Jewish school in North Miami
Oh,
Beach.
nice.
And my grandfather, who just passed away, I think 2 years ago now, he was at 92 or three, was a Holocaust survivor. He was actually in the Soviet labor camps
Wow.
during the war. And my grandmother, who passed away a long time ago, maybe 25 years ago, she was actually in some of the concentration camps, and
Mm.
she was passed around through there, and ultimately ran away and was living in the
Wow.
forests. But what I've found is that it feels like even in the last decade, and I'm sure that for my parents and for, my mom and for, my generation, it feels like something slipped where people kind of just either forgot about the Holocaust or it went straight into ancient history, like you may as well say Christopher Columbus in the same sentence to a lot of these people, a lot of kids today, and I think that, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, and what the research was like
Mm.
in your newest project, and I mean, and one of the biggest challenges, I'm sure, just in terms of logistics, is that the generation of survivors are pretty much all extremely, extremely old, and they're,
Hmm.
mid to late 90s or passed away already. So, you want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, I started working. I had a client that I developed. I had a friendship with here in Florida. He was in South Florida. I'm not in South Florida right now, but I'm based there. And Yaakov Heller, who's at that point he was like 75, or so, and he was still a globally renowned artist. And started working with him. Got hired to create. He had no visual representation of his work other than pictures and whatnot.
Wow.
He'd been doing it at that point since he was a young kid, and he was, world renowned. But very, very few people outside of, I would say the people that already knew him were going to find out about him. But he had a big social media following. So we started working together, and he had several being he was actually born in Cleveland, but he made his name for himself being an Israeli artist, even though he's not technically Israeli. So interesting. And so I started developing some ideas to do short documentaries on his items, the making of his items, and um,
Oh,
yeah, and so
nice.
we'd go back retrospectively, and things that were made, and he'd talk about it, and I noticed not everything was Holocaust related, but the big thing was this Garden of Humanity that he was commissioned to create, which is really not just about the Holocaust, but dealt with all the atrocities of the 20th century mixed into one beautiful garden, if you will, and they had different benches with different sayings on them, and from world leaders to pop culture figures, and then Benjamin Ferencz, who I had no idea who he was. And so Yaakov had sent me some information about Ben. I started researching Ben, to your question from a few questions ago. And I
Sure.
found like a video of him. It looked like it was a TEDx video. And he'd done it like in his living room, and it was incredible. This guy was like 95 or whatever he was at the time when he did it, and I was like, and he's talking about the Holocaust and what he lived through, and he tried the Nazis, and I was like, wow, this guy's, incredible. So I said to Yaakov, I said, well, we should, bring him down here to the Garden of Humanity. And he goes, well, he was here once before when, we unveiled it. And I said, I know, but now we can talk about with you and him. And so we brought him down. He was living in Delray at the time, and he came down with his son had come into town, and I mean, here he is. He's this little man, 4'11", but he was like such a giant in the world if you research him, and again, I didn't know much about him, but I'll tell you, just the 2 3 hours we spent with him, you learn so much about history, and he's sort of reflecting, looking back as we're going through the Garden of Humanity. There's, the all the different things that Yaakov created in the garden that talk about, the flame and the busts and the things of nature that reflect what happened during the Holocaust, and the signatures, the never again, and things of that nature. It's not all about the Holocaust, but Ben, you really opened my eyes. Even being a Jewish person in this era, there's still the denial, not within the Jewish community, but the struggle to people like yourself who had grandparents that lived through the Holocaust, or Yaakov, that had family that lived through the Holocaust, or Ben, who at 27 tried the Nazis. He was the youngest. It came
Crazy.
right out of Harvard, and General Patton tapped him to try the Nazis. So he was, the Einstein group in trial, which was one of the 11 trials that were going on simultaneously to try the Nazis. But um, I don't know. I got sucked into it in a good way, and I was like, we got to tell these stories. So actually, I did this whole series of Q&A with both of them, and I went back to Yaakov's investor. I said, I think we got something here, and Yaakov said, you know what? I don't know if you heard this, but I asked Ben if I could make a bust of him. And I said, no, I didn't hear that. He goes, yeah. And he said, yeah, go for it. Two heads are better than one. I said, oh, okay. So that sort of sat in my head, and we got the approval, and I sort of went back in time, but then I followed Yaakov to make this bust over 12 days, just on my own. I didn't have my videographer with me, or just because he would work in different stages. And so we then went to Ben's home, and he would, talk about what happened and do final finishes of his face. And so it became, this short documentary that came out of just conversation about, peace, tolerance, humanity, and what Ben went through, and what Yaakov's mission is to, keep those memories of alive, not just the 6 million, but the people like your grandparents who, struggled to get out, made it out in some cases where little kids don't have the, the memory that, an older person would have. But to your point, that became like a driving mission. And so it took a long time because we were dealing with the pandemic, and editing, virtually, and whatnot. But bottom line is we create this little half-hour piece of history, and the bust that was created by Yaakov now sits in the International Criminal Court in The Hague, which, I was the one to be able to tell him that, which was a very nice, feather in his.
What was it? What was
He
his
was,
response? What was his
extremely.
reaction?
Yaakov's not an emotionally charged man visibly, but he was just so. He was very excited about it, obviously, and it's like he loved, what Ben represented, and I think the more people that get exposed to not just my film but other films about Ben, there's been a few others that are incredibly well done. But two heads are better than one is really, this magical thing that transpired between the two of them, and I was able to sort of be the buffer between them in a good way to capture these moments and tell the story. So storytelling, sometimes is very innate. You feel it, like there's a story here, has to be told, or you go in, upstream, and you say, I want to tell this story. So in this case, it was like really a bizarre situation, because we were just there to talk about, the Garden of Humanity and Ben's, history, and we were going to just put some videos together. And now, you know, two heads are better than one, the making of the Ben Ferenc bus, which is an interesting title. I really wanted to capture what it's about, because there's I don't know if you've seen it yet, but it's literally not, there's not one image in the entire thing that has any negative connotation. In other words, there's no Nazis, there's nobody's dying. It's all, present day, and then a little retrospective on Ben's history. And I did that so that people would obviously have their own imagination. We all know what Steven Spielberg was able to accomplish with Schindler's List. But, this is a guy that,
Sure.
he was the last living chief prosecutor from the Nuremberg trials. And so he just passed away. It's just an incredible moment for me to, to be able to do that and to honor Ben and Yaakov, obviously, simultaneously. And then, Yaakov's bust is just, it's emblematic of what Ben did in his life. It was a very gratifying thing to do. And, you don't get to do those things too often.
Definitely not. Definitely not, and I mean, it's so beautiful. It's so emotional too. Also because
Yeah.
I saw that so much of the emphasis is on, this is something that obviously takes a really special type of human. And, you know, my grandfather, for example, I love him, and he loved nothing more than his family
Hmm.
and, Jews and Israel and America. Like those were like the priorities in his life. But he had like he had some vehemence. He would push back if, if anyone tried to kind of make any kind of light, or like, he wouldn't be afraid to emphasize that, the pain or the struggles that he went through.
Hmm.
But I think it's something else entirely. It's a different type of human being, and I don't even know if I would be the same kind of person that can kind of look back, like choose to make a documentary about this and choose to like only look at the unifying factors that arise from it, as opposed to avoiding all the, all the negativity, especially that they'd gone through personally,
Oh,
and all
yeah.
the trauma and
Yeah.
all the. I mean, this is the worst with some of the worst crimes in human
No
history,
question.
and I can't even imagine at 27 years old, that you're going to be like I'm 30, and I cannot imagine standing in front of my greatest enemy. Forget about some of these Nazis and some of the leaders of the Nazis. I can't imagine standing in front of them today and going after them. It takes such a different type of human being.
Yeah.
It's really, really,
Yeah,
it's really
no, no, you're
it's
right. You're
moving.
right. I mean, Ben was a different type of human being. He came from nothing, rose up, went to school. It grew up in New York. Went to school. Was so smart that he got a full scholarship to Harvard, and went to
Yeah,
Harvard, and then went into the service and came out of the service. And I said Patton tapped him to be one of the chief prosecutor. So, he obviously was so intelligent, and having the unique history that he had. And then what was sort of interesting, and it got very emotional for him, and I captured a little bit of it in the documentary, is, after the war. In other words, as he was preparing for the trial, he actually went into the camps, and so he was seeing the aftermath. Okay, not just of.
have you been there?
No,
Have you been? Have
I
you been
have
to?
not, and it's like one of those things. I don't have a desire to go, because it's just, to your point, it's such a there's a painful part of it. But having done what I've done, I feel like my contribution is there. But I don't know if I could, have any emotion, any more emotion to it on a positive side. It would just be like I think non-Jews, every non-Jew that you can get to go there and watch these things, because that, look, at large, Jewish people understand that this is history. There's a faction of society, and it's getting louder. They're denouncing the Holocaust, as we've chatted about, and that, to me, is the danger. And that's why these things, permanent fixtures, art, documentaries, conversations, it
Yeah,
needs to have a louder voice. So, to me, that's most important. But we've got leaders of the world, some of them here in the United States and some of them abroad, that don't necessarily denounce the Holocaust, but they denounce Israel, they denounce the United States. And so, this it's a scary moment, and you have to rise up and speak out. So I think that's why, a lot of the, that generation that is, fading away, unfortunately. I mean, I'm really excited about, on the other side, there are people that are capturing, interviews with, Holocaust survivors. I have an associate in New York. I think she's done close to 200 interviews with survivors over the last 5 or 10 years. So I'm going to work with her on
Yeah.
getting that out. And this is the problem: is the miseducation of the world, and so you know 1 and 1 is not 3 globally, but yet, when you look at the history of the Holocaust and people say there was no Holocaust, or they change the history books that the next generation is reading and coming up with, this is the danger. Thankfully, we've got enough video and film, and so if people are really interested in exploring it, they have no shortage. So I was able to get this short film on several platforms, which to me was exciting. And we're just really, I mean, it took a long time to get there, but we're now going to have a pretty big campaign to get this word out. And you know, Yakov's going to make more busts available for those who want to honor Ben. So it's to me, that makes it all worthwhile.
That's awesome. It's really awesome. I agree. I think that's such a beautiful it's
Yeah,
endeavor. The last question I'll ask you, and then I appreciate your time, and I'll let you go after that. Just in terms of logistics, out of curiosity, when now that this film, now that this documentary is filming on all those platforms that you mentioned, Amazon, Netflix, what else?
it's Amazon, Apple TV Plus,
Apple, Netflix, yeah.
Google.
So did you have to so you've basically shot the documentary, edited it, wrapped it up, and then went to each platform and said, "Hey, I'd like to distribute this on this," or did you go to them with the concept and then they want to do how does that work?
No, no, this thing was done privately, and then
Okay.
it's an interesting question. It's to get to that level. It's all about making the right connectivity to a distributor. Apple,
Right.
Google, Netflix, which is not on Netflix, but Amazon. These are the giant platforms, as we all know. It's ubiquitous. So you either
But do they not want they don't want to be the
well
exclusive platform that it's
well they
streaming on? Like how do you get across multiple platforms?
the short answer is through a distributor. Um, so I
Gotcha.
pitched this to one distributor. They loved it, and we moved forward accordingly. The X factor for me was I didn't really want to have to charge people. It's only a few bucks to watch it, but they sort of required me to do it, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
But aside from, I mean,
Gotcha.
truthfully, I said I want as many people to watch this as we can. I don't want to make any money off of it, So, and it's also like a psychological thing. I think if you charge people to watch it, you're gonna have a fewer eyeballs. But
Sure, sure.
that's sort of the
What
interesting
about YouTube?
component. But typically, uh, if you have a distributor, you have an agent, you have a lawyer. Those three things sort of work synergistically. But projects I'm working on now, we're in that stage now as well, where we haven't done it yet. We have a sizzle reel, so that always helps. People can see what the project's going to be about, who's going to be in it, and then you can pitch it with those entities to the bigger platforms. And to your point, typically they will buy it or they will license it, and it'll just be on that platform. If they license it, it's for
Hmm.
a finite period of time, and then you can go to another platform. Or you can do what I did, where if it's independently produced and financed, and you can get it on as many platforms as you can or you want. But typically, if if it's a monetary venture, money making venture, then you're going to go with one, and you'll hopefully get enough interest where they bid on it, and you could have a little bidding war going on depending upon what the subject matter is.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And what about, and if you want, and would you have any interest? I know that, and that YouTube actually gets by
Hmm.
far the most
Yep.
eyeballs these days. Would you ever put any of these
Well,
documentaries on
this
YouTube?
one's on
And
YouTube as well. It's on
oh,
YouTube, but
nice,
again,
awesome.
it's you have to pay the $1.99, $2.99 fee, but it's no big deal.
Well, I'm sure
Yeah,
it's
I
well
mean,
worth
I
it.
think
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
absolutely, but it to me it's just more of a, like I said, a psychological thing. YouTube is, when I worked at the Box Music Network, really we were sort of the precursor to YouTube and all these streaming platforms. It was the first on-demand video network in the world, and so people would call a 900 number to be able to watch a music video. And in this case, YouTube, obviously
Sure.
with the internet the way it is, you can either charge people the way we're doing it, or like most people, you're able to just watch it
Just
freely.
throw it up and hope you get a lot
Yeah,
of viewers.
exactly. So, and then,
That's right.
so content creators now, the barrier to entry is nothing. It's if you create good content, create good followers, you'll get good advertisers, and you can monetize it, as we're seeing. I mean, most of these content creators are in that category, and it's an amazing thing in 2025.
Yeah, yeah, it's really awesome. Eric, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for this. Maybe we'll be in touch. Maybe we'll watch the Bruce Springsteen the making of Nebraska
Yeah, man,
together.
that's
Uh,
gonna.
but best of luck with all these new projects that you have coming up. I'm really excited to hear about them, and hopefully, maybe we'll do another interview again
Yeah, and
after
I
you're done with those. We'll
appreciate
talk about those a
appreciate
little bit.
your efforts, and thank you. And good luck. You're a sharp young man, I can tell. So good luck with your podcast. I'm sure it's gonna keep growing.
I appreciate that.
Take care.
Thank you so
All
much.
right.
Have a great weekend. All right, take care. Thank you. Bye.